Hello everyone, welcome to the Institute of Austrian Economics, and I'm Mithun Datta. Today we are going to discuss the economics of Keynes, Lord Keynes versus Dr. Ambedkar and the Austrians. In this lecture I plan to cover who was John Maynard Keynes, what are his major works, what are the methods of Keynesian economics, and differences between him and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar with respect to the Indian rupees. And then about Keynes, what are the difference between Keynes and Austrians, and what are the similarities between Keynesians and Austrians. In this lecture, I'm going to cover a lot of stuff, but I'm not going to get into the extreme details of those work. But I'm going to give an overview of what actually Keynes, the thought process of Keynes, and what Keynes was trying, how he approached different economic problems. So basically, John Maynard Keynes was the first Baron. He is also known as first Baron Keynes. He was a British economist, and fundamentally, he is known as the father of modern macroeconomics. He largely developed the mainstream economics today, what we see in practice by various government. Uh, he was a civil servant, and he studied his economics in Cambridge University. He was mostly interested in mathematics and philosophy. He was a fan of Alfred Marshall and David Ricardo, and he had certain differences with other neoclassicals, but mostly he was a Marshallian, and he was a fan of Walras and David Ricardo. Uh, he he completed his study, like he did his BA form in mathematics, and his economics and philosophy he he studied those informally in Cambridge. He Keynes, after that, after completing his graduation, he started working as a clerk in Indian office. So the career of Keynes started with India. He was dealing with the statistics of government, dealing with money, and with the different policies of the government back then. India at that point of time was on the silver standard, whereas other countries in the world, like Great Britain, was under the gold standard. India at that point of time was under the British rule, the company rule. It all started with the British East India Company, and the, then the British government took over the administration of India. And after that, they started to restructure the Indian governance, administration, and how the money was managed, how their policies, and they they had they thought of restructuring India into a developed country. So that is when Keynes started his career with India, and the stage of the world was like the the industrial revolution was going on, and there were a lot of banking changes. There were no central banks at that point of time. They were coming into existence. There were banks. Trade and commerce had increased from had taken an uh, uh, international stage, and the volume of international trade had also increased. And with that, there were certain um, uh, instabilities, political instabilities as well in that period, which with the rise of constitutional governments and stuff. So that is where Keynes starts his career. He he comes to India. He starts to look into the financial matters of with the Indian government. And then he resigned from his position, and he returned to in 1908 he returned back to Cambridge, and after that he started writing a book on the Indian currency and finance. And he was appointed by the Royal Commission to look into the Indian currency. The problem was with Indian currency is that during the silver standard crisis, there was large amount of silver mines which were found, and the silver rate started decreasing with respect to. I will try to.
আমি ভাবি না লেকচার দিচ্ছে কিছু খাচ্ছি হ্যাঁ ওই ইয়েতে কম্পিউটারে এখানে লেকচার দিচ্ছে চালাচ্ছি চালাইতে কথা
For it. Yeah, now it's better, I think, right? Sorry about that. So, so he started looking into the like the government at that point of time had a problem where you know the silver was devaluing against the Indian against gold, and in the gold standard the problem was like there is to be a parity, there is to be a ratio, like how much gold will be given against silver. So they had the governments used to have some trade rates, a exchange rate, and that is how they used to manage their currencies. So when silver started devaluating, it used to now the Indian trade, like India was trading with China, with Asian countries as the European countries, and there was trade balance differences, and there was a problem in in adjusting the parity of silver to gold. So that is when that is what Keynes started writing in his book, the Indian crisis, finance and finance. So the major works of Keynes has his first book was Indian Currency and Finance, which we will look into, like what was the contents of that book in a little while. The next book he had written on the Treaty of Versailles, which was in 1990 after the World War, where he wrote the economic consequences of peace. Then in 1921, he wrote a treatise on probability under Marshall's guidance, and with funding from his dad. His dad was also an economist, a very influential person. And in 1930, he wrote another book, a treatise on money. The treatise on probability and the treatise of money is something which his most of his thoughts actually go into the general theory of employment, interest, and money in 1936, which is his magnum opus, which is the most important book of Keynes. Uh, Now, coming back to the first book, The Indian Currency and Finance, it has 8 chapters, and here he talks about the present position of rupee, the gold exchange standard, paper currency, the position of gold in India, and the proposal for gold currency, council bill and remittance, secretary, the Secretary of State's reserve and cash balances, the Indian banking, and the Indian rate of discount. This book doesn't elaborate the origin of Indian rupee or the origin of money. It doesn't go into those details. Uh, the what was going on at that period is, like as I said, like silver was pretty cheap, and the government started. I mean, there were the Indian rupee was a silver coin. They used to give out silver coin. So at government in those days used to have mints where they used to issue gold coins and silver coins. So what happened is, like they in India, the British government started minting a lot of silver currency, and the silver value started depreciating. So that made the Indian goods, for example, India used to compete for tea with China, and China was also on silver standard. So basically, when now there was a proposal that India should move into a gold standard, gold exchange standard. The problem is that England, who was the country which was investing in India, they were on gold standard, and they wanted they had problems in valuating the rupee, and the British India government had a lot of debts on with the English bank, the Bank of London, the Bank of England, and to pay those debts, and to pay off the debts, it was creating a pressure on the Indian government. So they wanted to standardize the value of rupee. And the other problem with international trade is like when the value of your currency fluctuates, people tend to they don't tend to invest in your country, or they don't tend to buy mostly they don't buy your council bills, which are like bonds against loans, and that those creates a problem. And also about remittance. Remittance is money transfer. Back in those days, the banking was not as we see in the present age, like interconnected banks having branches in throughout the country, throughout the world. That was not the case in back then. And the other thing is, when they were on gold and silver standard, when they were on gold and silver standard, the problem is like when you have a trade balance, when you want to pay off the debts, when there is a there is a tender to be encashed, you have to transfer that gold from India to London, or from India to London. So you have to ship that gold or silver, whatever is required. The other problem that the banks used to face back then is the purchasing of gold and silver bullions. So basically, like whenever there is a shortage of coins, so the government has to go and buy gold and silver from the market, and that is a very difficult task to do, because the government has to estimate like how much amount of gold it needs to buy, how much amount of silver it needs to buy. And there is also a parity, like the governments back then used to issue gold and silver coins. The silver coins were mostly used as a local currency for small transactions, and there were other mediums like copper and nickel, which were also used as coin for smaller transaction. Gold was something which was used for mostly for bigger transactions and international transfers. So to buy gold, the price of gold was much stable than, and silver used to be stable. But when they found silver for cheap, the government started producing more of silver currency and less of gold currency. The case in England and other countries which were not on silver standard, they used to prefer gold. And when silver started devaluating, they had a problem. Like they did not prefer to accept gold. And the problem with the people on the silver standard is like when they wanted to buy gold, it was the parity, the difference that they had calculated, it was quite huge. And the other problem that the government did back then was they started minting a lot of silver coins, and most of the silver coins were lying idle in their cash balance reserves, in their bank reserves. Not in their bank reserves. Basically, government was separate from banking. It was the government reserves where they had to keep those cash balances. Besides that, some governments also started issuing notes. These notes were like you used to have state banks in various places, where like Presidency of Madras, or even Madras, Calcutta, and there were very different kingdoms who used to issue those notes. Now the problem with traders were like these notes were could only be encashed in for gold or silver against gold or silver in the branch from which the note has been issued. For example, if it has been issued in State Bank of Madras, you cannot go to the Bank of England and encash that note against gold or silver. You have to do it in Madras itself. So even this is something which I as far as I know, was something which was a problem back in the United States as well, where you had banks in different states, and different state banks where you did not have a single uniform acceptance of the currency notes. Um, the other problem was like when you're issuing notes, the Keynes saw that most of the gold and silver were lying idle in the bank reserve, and most of the transactions were taking place using checks and paper currency. So he saw that like checks and this banknotes can be an alternate for gold. So that is where his thought of came in, like that gold and the real bullion commodity can be replaced or by paper currency or by checks or by remittance bond. Uh, the other thing that Keynes noticed in India is basically like people have different taste for some people who are into international trade, like certain regions in India where like in Punjab or Bombay they used to prefer uh, gold because this states were pretty rich, richer than comparative to Bengal or the other states which were very relatively poor, and they did not have that much savings or money to buy gold. I mean, to replace like silver rupee against gold coin. So that was the problem back then. Like certain states, they couldn't afford gold. You have a minimum denomination of gold, and that was not fit for daily transactions. The value of gold would have been much more larger than silver, so they had to keep silver as well. And there were other port cities like Bombay, where they used to trade with most of the trade from England used to arrive at Bombay, and then it gets used to get distributed in various places. So Mumbai, Gujarat, and these port cities, they used to mostly trade with in gold. Even Egypt, they had a gold currency. So Keynes mentions that gold was something which port cities mostly used to prefer, which were doing international transactions, and that is where gold was something which was readily acceptable by the governments, by the people back then. So they that is what the problem with the government was, that they were not sure like how much gold they should keep and how much silver they should keep. And when they were trying to attempt to move from silver standard to gold standard, these were the challenges that they were facing, that they wanted to issue gold coins instead of silver coin. They stopped minting of silver coins altogether because there was so much silver lying with the reserves, and they started issuing, they wanted people to take gold coins, so they started issuing gold coin at a lower value than what the market value was. Like instead of silver, they started issuing gold, which was of a higher value. So they had a problem, like the bullion traders and other traders for who used to hoard gold. They started taking gold and from the British government, and they started hoarding it. And the bank balance and the currency balance, because of that, because the hoarding of the gold, the uh, gold hoards, the gold reserve started decreasing, and then they had a lot of silver reserves as well. The other problem was like sometimes they would have the gold is a costly metal. Now when there are harvest seasons, there is a cycle where there is a harvest season or a festival season, they tend to withdraw currency from the bank, and mostly silver was something which is local. The demand for silver rises, and the government had to go and buy silver, started issuing silver. And at other times, like when they wanted to make international trade, or for exporting their harvest, they started demanding gold. So this reserve problem is something that the government was struggling to maintain. And under the gold standard exchange, like they had like one shell sterling and 4 pence equals to 15 Indian rupees. So they started to, the government started to keep some parity exchange, like how much gold is worth to how much silver. But the market rate of silver and gold always used to fluctuate because of the change in demand for gold coins and silver coins. So the government could not manage that. Like at certain point of time, gold was overvalued or undervalued, and people stopped taking buying gold from the government, and rather they would actually uh, take gold to the mint and get it minted. Thereafter, the government stopped mints from accepting private gold and making money out of this. There is a legal law that whenever the government used to accept cash only in coins which were minted at their government mints, and government used to earn a lot of profit from this mints. So that is one of the reasons that government had a control over mints as well. The other thing that India tried at that point of time was bimetallism, where if you have a parity like 4:1 for silver, or 4:2 for silver, the coin that they used to mint will have 4:1 ratio of silver. The problem is that when the ratio changes, the coin is not readily acceptable to the people. So they wouldn't accept that coin of bimetallism. So bimetallism is something which failed. Um, so these were certain problems, and the other thing is in certain part of India where they had paper currency. So they did is like they ordered every bank, they passed a law where every bank has to encash the cash balance, I mean the notes of other bank as well. So they started they forced every bank to accept notes of other banks. So the Madras, the money, the rupee from the Bank of Madras issued note of Indian rupee could be encashed in other areas as well. So Indian currency at that point of time was an international currency. It was acceptable in Egypt, it was acceptable in Burma, and also in China. So mostly the trade which used to take place between Burma and with Madras is mostly of rice and other goods. So in that period, these notes become very popular with the locals over here now, because as they can they could go take this rupee and against gold in or silver coins, they could take that coins and then they could deposit it and get rupee in exchange, which they would which they could carry easily, and it used to save them of the transport and the logistic cost, as well as the risk of carrying paper notes is much more less than carrying actual bullions. So that is why the notes also become popular. And Keynes noticed that the banks at that point of time were facing problem like to avoid bank runs and to provide money, they were facing challenges like how much reserves to keep and what should be the standard of exchange between gold, silver, and other currencies. So he says that what he comes to conclusion is like there is a bank rate. They should follow the bank rate, like what the interest rate is for gold and silver money, and by that they should determine like how much reserves they should keep. And the other thing that Keynes observed, like whenever there is a chance of bank run due to bad harvest or devaluation of silver or gold, the government faces a problem that they have to go and bail out the banks. So the government, for managing the crisis, is always eager to help out people in I mean help out the banks in times of crisis. The other problem with gold standard is whenever there is a shift in demand, like for example, there is a high demand for gold coins. Uh, the gold merchants used to raise the price of gold for at a very high premium. So that was one of the problem. Other problem was of remittance like where they used to sell council bills in London, and they used to get gold from there, and they would remit that amount in Calcutta. But these two cities had different rate of interest for gold and silver, or gold in Calcutta. Like gold in Calcutta was not used to get that much amount in interest, whereas London used to prefer gold. So these were the problems which the governments used to face while handling the gold standard exchange. But Keynes, he suggested that the government should use statistics and try to manage, like they should buy silver at off period, they should try to buy silver and gold from Australia, and how they can work out the logistic cost. There was a plan by the British mints to make gold locally. So he was against that idea of the flow of gold from London to Bombay to India, and from India to London back. So he was like against the idea of gold flowing out of the country. So he wanted like gold should be there itself in the Bank of England itself, and he shows that he tries to justify the Bank of England's management of the banking system, and he says that he claims that that is a superior system, and they can manage the market. I mean, they can buy gold and sell gold at a better rate than what India could do. And it doesn't actually matter, like even if you transport or you don't transport, because most of the gold is going to lie in the government in the reserves, in the bank reserves or the government reserves. So that is what the entire the theory of Keynes is like with Indian currency and finance. Do you have any questions? Cool. The next book that Keynes wrote was The Economic Consequences of Peace, where he was not pretty happy with the terms that was imposed by the Treaty of Versailles on Germany after the war. Actually, he starts this book by blaming Germany, like Germany was the culprit in initiating the war, and Germany should be made to pay. But he was against the idea that the treaty was trying to impose heavy terms on Germany, and he was often of the idea that the Europe should not set those terms on Germany, because if Germany collapses, they will have effects on negative effects on entire Europe as well. So he wanted America to actually issue credit to Germany, and England and other nations to issue credit to Germany, so that the Germany could be restructured, and after the war, like there can be a restructuring possible. Especially America was not that much affected by the World War, but most of the European nations were. So he proposed America to expand credit to European nations, so that Germany and other nations could be rebuilt, and after that they can pay off the debts. But this did not go well with the politicians back then, and they did not take Keynes seriously, and he was pretty much disappointed with it, and he proposed he pointed out like uh, this is going to lead into another war due to discontent and disintegration of Europe. So this is going to boomerang back on them itself. So that is what economic consequences of peace, it's a book all about. So that's his second book. And then he wrote the next book. He went back to Cambridge, and now from the he was more inclined towards the market and its behavior. So he started pondering on economic theory, like he already had an idea about how monetary economics works. I mean, how banking and other things work. He wanted to find out like what should be the exact rates of transfer of money transfers, and the parities between gold, silver, and different bullions, uh, and interest rates and the effects of interest rate. He started reading probability. He was a fan of Marshall as well. He studied under Marshall, so he wanted to and he was also a fan of philosophy. So he started looking into the probability, the how certain things can be explained. So there there he started investigating like how uncertainty can be dealt with. So this is a book where he gets into certain thing of expectation, and how logic can be used in uncertain areas where there is uncertainty. So he gives an example in this book, like is our expectation of rain when we start out for a walk always more likely than not, or less likely than not? or as likely or not. So he's talking about the probabilities, different probabilities, where to carry an umbrella or not. And he looks at two various probable factors, where the different various factors which a person would take into account to make up his mind whether to carry the umbrella or not. So this is what his book on probability was like. He was exploring on the use of probability in economics. The next book that he wrote was on a treatise on money. Keynes, unlike Menger or even Ambedkar, he never ever focused into what money is. Money is something which for him is for him, like it's something that he might have proposed gold or gold standard to India, but there was always a skepticism in his mind, or a doubt in his mind, or a dislike or a disgust in the idle resources that he saw, like the maintenance of reserve, and keeping gold and hoarding gold by people. So that was reflected in his first book as well. And this is something which Keynes never actually goes in and explains in any of his books. I don't think he has done any kind of origin of money and what money is, how money works. But he used to, I mean, even in the Indian finance and currency, he mentions that Indian people, they hoard gold, and in times of crisis, they don't readily invest that gold into capital investment. So he had that if feeling a mistrust, or a negative feeling towards the savings of gold, or towards saving. And that is where he in this treatise, what he came up with the term of liquidity as well. Like there is a liquidity problem, and this is the term which Keynes used it here for the first time. He in this book, the major point that he proved was that if savings exceed investment, then a recession will occur. So that is what he saw, the correlation between savings and depressions. Uh, so this is what treatise on money was all about. And for Keynes, like he mentioned it in one of his famous quote, where he says, "For the engine which drives enterprise, it's not thrift but profit." So he looks at enterprise like they need money and they need spending, and if the consumer starts saving, then the enterprise cannot sell their goods. So that is something which he mentions in this book. And after that, in 1936, Keynes goes in and he puts all this thought into his magnum opus, the General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. Uh, I have actually try to summarize like what is written in this book. And if you see now, this Keynes here is little bit changed, because he had suffered some loss in the 1920 depression as well. So he had a mistrust of the market as well. Initial at times, like when I was reading his first book, The Indian Currency and Finance, there he at times he referred like the government cannot fix prices, it should be left to the market and stuff. But in general theory of employment, interest, and money, the mindset of Keynes had literally changed into a different mind frame altogether. So in this book, he is totally pro government, and he is anti anti the market. He doesn't believe in the market anymore. He understands probability. He had a belief in probability, like probability could show what is certain in the future. So he understands that certain things are not possible because of his experience of the money that he lost out in the market in the crisis of 1920. So this is a book which is the new Keynes kind of thing. And here he basically he starts with the the argument against the neoclassical and their framework. The neoclassicals basically they 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 had an idea like on based on Say's law, where they believe that if you can supply goods at a cheaper rate, then people would be more likely to buy it. So their focus was always about lowering the cost of creating of creation of goods, and creating more goods to go for high production, so that there are more consumption goods available in the market. And that is something which is going to create prosperity, and people are more likely to buy it. So that was the neoclassical approach, and Keynes had a problem with that. He found that this was an error. In depression, he saw that there was high unemployment and people were not willing to buy goods, and this was not a voluntary unemployment. He calls it as a fictional unemployment. Uh, and he says that if the supply is like there is a Say's law which says the supply creates is on demand, and he says that people are willing to work. There is a supply of people willing to work, but there is no employment. And he doesn't pay any attention to the other factors, what the government might have done, and what would be the effects of that those policies, government policies and stuff. But he takes it to be, a failure in the Say's law, or in the neoclassical thinking. And this is right there in the first chapter, which he starts like he talks about that this is something which is wrong in the classical theory. And he proceeds there. He talks about like when what people get money, and what they do, they like to spend. And when there is some problem with the market, or the economic situation changes, there is a high uncertainty. uh, the capitalists, they don't invest their money into the market, and that creates, like, if there is no investment, it that means lower job, and that is what is the culprit. So he gets into that frame of mind where he says that there is a lack of animal spirit. So that is the reason that capitalists do not want to invest money into the market, or they want to, you know start new ventures. And that is why we have a high unemployment. And this creates a lot of problem for the people. So sorry, just hold on a second. This is something which I have summarized, and then he goes into the first part is more about the criticism of the neoclassical thinking of supply creates is all demand. In the second part, he goes into explain something. Just give me a second. Into defining different structures like price levels and net output. Here he makes a very uh, important observation, or his you can see you can look into his thought over here. He says we can't measure net output, but we can count the number of people employed. In general, if more people are working, then more stuff is getting made. Although this obviously isn't perfect connection, but employment is a kind of more interesting number, and it will have to do. So what he's looking at, he doesn't know, he is not trying to measure like if people are getting wealthy, or what the amount of goods. But what he believes that if he can make a count of the actual money values, or regardless of the price, what is the currency there in the market, or what how much money is there in the market. And if he looks into the number of people which are employed, if he can get that count, he can work out like what uh, how 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 the how to solve an economic crisis. So this is where his fundamental thing comes in, where he needs certain count so that he can put it into a differential calculus and find out like what can be, what how we can create some employment and get these people to work. So he says that the problem with why businesses don't invest money is because of change in expectation. Like he says that the businesses work on based on sales and expectations, uh, and businesses mostly work in the short term expectations, like if they invest now, how soon they will get their money, and that is what drives the business. And he sees a problem that if these expectations are negative, like the lack of animal instinct, then the businessman wouldn't invest more money into the system. So he looks into these transactions in these transitions of expectations. So he looks like he says that when there is a, there is a high animal instinct, or there is a high expectation that the things will be good, people hire more, and when their expectation change, they stop hiring. And that is what is creating the unemployment problem. So he says that today's decisions are based on conditions of today and expectations about tomorrow, not on past expectation or the conditions of the past. And in practice, people don't calculate their expectations from scratch every morning. They keep doing what they did yesterday unless they have a reason to change. Long-term expectations cannot be checked, so they don't change. They often change suddenly. They can't even be approximately estimated. So this is something which Keynes believes, that expectations are a problem that markets can get into in a phase where you have entrepreneurs are going to lose a lot of their money, and then they are not going to, make investments. So he tries to look into the total income of the community and what is the total consumption, and he finds a correlation between what might be the things which might be creating unemployment. And here we can see that Keynes is relying a lot on the Marshallian theory of cost and profits, where you have windfall profits, and how that will play into 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 the employment, how that will correlate to the employment and production of goods. So investment, he makes that investment is certain amount of output which is in consumed. So it's like he's making a he he doesn't look into savings and investment at the same thing. He looks at the savings as a part where people are unwilling to invest, and investment is a amount which is a part which is not being invested yet. I mean, they are not looking for an output yet from the market. So he he is looking for the statistics, and he looks for what businesses are doing, and how many goods are he sees a correlation over there. So he is looking at what is the consumption and what is the production. If production is going down, that means employment will also go down. So he sees that relationship, and he's trying to figure out like what would be the problem, what would be the solution to the problem. And he looks into this problem, and he wants to propose the government, but before as a solution. But before that, he looks into the gold standard as well, where he looks into he views the mining operation of government to dig out to into mines and bring out gold and make or silver from the mines and to make money out of he looks at the same analogy in a different way, where he thinks that the same can be done by printed pieces of paper, and they can be buried into into garbage, and the government can actually go in and your ask enterprises to get in and to employ these people to dig out those money, and it's like as good as digging out gold from the gold mine. So that is another thing which Keynes covers in this book. He feels that he also says that that you know the like the mining operation of gold and silver for the use of money is actually a wasteful labor, and that could be redirected into more meaningful stuff by just using printed pieces of paper. That same labor could be reused for building houses and other stuff. So this is another thing he has. And then he also blames the market. He says that that farmers and other people are going to invest in stock markets, and in stock market they lose out money, and the government must look into must start regulating the stock market, because it's more like a gambling. What good like he compares the stock market with musical chair and with casinos, and he finds that entire operation to be meaningless. So that's another thing which he puts into uh, he mentions in this book, like when the capital development of a country has become a byproduct of the activities of a casino, the jobs is likely to be ill done. Measure of success attended by Wall Street, regarded as an institution of which proper social purpose is to direct new investment into most profitable channels in terms of the future yield, cannot be claimed as one of the outstanding triumphs of laissez-faire capitalism, which is not surprising. And if I'm right in thinking that the best brains of the Wall Street have been directed towards a different object. So he proposes hefty taxes on keeping this animal spirits into in check, and he proposes that the government should like the capitalist is the entrepreneurs are not does not have a long sight, a long-term plan. Only the governments can envision such plans, such long-term plans, and therefore the government should get in and start investing into various projects. So that's one thing which that's another thing which Keynes mentioned in this book. And he says that when people start investing money, there is a change in the rate of interest as well. Like when people save more money, the interest rate goes down, but it doesn't mean that if the interest rates are going down, that people will start investing. So there has to be a different way. So he proposes that government should start giving loans at a very low interest rate, so that people don't save but keep on spending. So that's another thing which he mentions over here, which is so that is yeah, it is here he mentions it. We said before, the business keep investing until their expected returns reaches an interest rate. So lower interest rate means that more investment. But what determines the rate of interest? It is often said that the interest rate is the price people demand for saving money instead of spending it. But this clearly isn't true. People can save money under their mattresses and not get any interest. No, the rate of interest is the price people demand for parting with their cash, which implies that if the rate of interest were lower, rewarding for parting with the cash were diminished. The aggregate amount of cash which the public would wish to hold would exceed the available supply, and if the rate of interest were raised, there would be surplus of cash which no one would be willing to hold. So, and if that's true, the quantity of money is the other factor which determines interest rate. The interest rate depends on the people's desire to hoard cash, their liquidity preference, and the quantity of money. So this is where he proposes like the government should go for a credit expansion, and they should provide cash to different to the unemployed, and they should take care of unemployed people, because the people are going to save, the capitalists are going to save, they are not going to invest when the interest rates are low, and when the economy is not good, there is not in a good state. There is a problem, like people are not willing to go for investment opportunities, so there is a lower demand for loans. So that is one reason where the savings should be discouraged by keeping the interest rates low by the bank, so that nobody is going to hoard their money, and there is a continuous investment process which takes place in the economy. So this is another point which Keynes mentions in this book. So he he also warns about certain problems like hyperinflation, liquidity trap in his book, but he doesn't go into those details like how they could manage this thing. So he says that the government can raise the interest rate and try to take care of it, but he doesn't get in and try to pay much more importance to it, like what to do at back then. So the other thing is like he wants uh, for employment creation, there is something like the government should interfere in wage rates as well. They should keep nominal minimum wages and different wages. The government should also do redistribution of income and wealth, so that they could balance out like the investment which is the savings which is not happening, uh, and redistribute it to the unemployed worker, so that there is a proper equilibrium or a balance in the society. So for him, the boom and bust cycle for Keynes is mostly about expectation, where there is the when people are very optimistic, they will be speculating of a bright future, and they will overbuy things in the market, and then suddenly there will be a catastrophe in the market, and they will realize that they have invested in stocks and stuff. I remember Keynes saying that even when the stock in the stock market, when the prices are rising of stock, there is an expectation that the prices are going to go up furthermore, and people jump in and they invest in that period. So that is what Keynes look at it as the boom period, like the expectation period where there is an optimism, and people are willing to invest even if the prices are going up, which is against the law of supply and demand kind of thing. And when they hit with the catastrophe, the prices fall, and then there is a pessimism, and you will find that people are investing more and are saving more and investing less. So especially when there is a stock market crash and people lose their money, so they have that negative expectation or the pessimism, where they won't be investing in the short period, and that is what is going to create a problem for the society. And this is where he justifies like the government, what the government should do, what the central bank should do, and he's against the gold standard. He finds idle resources, like resources which are not being invested continuously, are something which is bad for the economy, is something wrong with human beings as such. So this is how he ends, like I do not attempt an answer in this place. it would need a volume of a different character to this one to form this one to indicate even in outline the practical measures in which they might gradually cloth. But if the ideas are correct and hypothesis on which the author himself must necessarily base what he writes, it would be a mistake. I predict to dispute their potency over a period of time. At the present moment, people are unusually expectant of more fundamental diagnosis, more particularly ready to receive it, eager to try it out. It should be even plausible, but apart from the contemporary mood, the ideas of economists and political philosophers, both when they are right and when they are wrong, are more powerful than is commonly understood. Indeed, the world ruled by little is practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influence are usually the slave of some defunct economist. Here he is referring to the classical economists who of and their theories of wage and employment. Madmen in authority who hear voices in air are distilling their frenzy from some academic scribbler of years back. I'm sure that the power of this vested interest is vastly exaggerated compared to the gradual encouragement of ideas, not indeed immediately, but after a certain interval. For in the field of economic and political philosophy, there are not many who are influenced by the new theories after they are 25 or 30 years of age, so that the ideas which the civil surgeons and politicians and even agitators apply to the current event are not likely to be the newest, but soon or late, it's the idea, not the vested interest, which are dangerous for good or evil. So basically, he's referring to the against the use of of the neoclassical uh, supply side economics, and he's proposing that these are the problems with the neoclassical concepts of viewing things, how they work, and that the demand is something which should be created in for for economy to remain stable, and that is what he's proposing in that in his ending chapters. So basically, he says if people are kept employed, they will keep consuming, and that is going to keep the businessman from. That is going to allow, that is going to change the expectation of businessman. They will keep on investing, and they will not hoard, and the economy will always be producing some goods, and people will be always consuming some goods. So that's basically what Keynes, the general theory of Keynes is, and that is how he looks into stuff. Now I will. Do you have any questions? Michael, you want to add in anything about Keynes on general theory? Cool, Michael. Now I will go back again to Ambedkar. Ambedkar is an Indian economist, and this is something which is interesting to the people in India. About he sharply, I mean, he was sharply against the ideas of Keynes. Uh, Ambedkar, he act he is his full name is like Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, and he was a lawyer, he was a social reformer, a politician, a jurist, and as well as a an economist. So he he did his he did his he obtained his degree in economics from Bombay University. Then he went to major in economics and in sociology, and then he went to he also studied in in the London School of Economics, and he did his doctorate over there. Initially, he started like he wrote this first book, his on economics, which was the problem of the rupee, its origin and its solution. So this is a book where he presents his problem entirely different from he proposes a solution entirely different from Keynes. There is a difference which many of us do not know. It is called as the gold standard classic. The difference is between gold standard classic and the gold standard exchange. The gold exchange standard. The difference is like in gold exchange standard, the government fixes a ratio, a proportion on which the exchange between gold and silver or any other metal which is being used is basically fixed by the government. So the government is going to determine like what should be the amount of silver which will be exchanged, which the government is going to exchange against gold. So if it is silver standard, then the government is going to decide like how much gold it is going to value, like how much silver it is going to give out against gold. So there is a parity between gold and silver. So gold standard is basically where you just have a gold coin and you issue a gold coin and you have a weight of that gold. So different kingdoms and different mints had different gold coins, and they had different purity level, different size, and different weight associated with their gold coin. So a pure gold standard is somewhere where they issue a gold coin and according to its weight and its purity, and that is used for comparison of two gold coins, and the parity is basically what goes into the market. So they're going to value that gold on basis of its purity and its content, rather than having parity like in the gold standard exchange. In the gold exchange standard, there is a parity which is fixed by the government, like it is going to buy silver at this rate from at this particular uh, amount of gold. So that's the thing. And Ambedkar actually starts, and he is actually he puts these problems which he claims that Professor Keynes has overlooked, like what is the problem if the government fixes the price of gold or silver. So he was against the idea of that the government should intervene with the control of mints, or even with the control of money. What he says that if the mints had to be closed, it should not be closed to the public, but it should be closed to the government. So he was a very much free market economist, and he explains like what were the problem with the mints. Like one point of time in history, during the Mughal period, India was one of the major trading countries in the world. It was the most powerful country besides China and UK and America. America at that point of time was not settled. And Dutch, British East India companies, the France, the Dutch Empire, and the German Empire. So it was a very powerful country at that point of time. The Mughals they had different mints in India, and the quality of the coin that the Mughals used to have, the standards that they have used to maintain with their mints was of a very great of a very good quality. The problem with mints in other countries and other places is that where that they did not used to make they did not have a proper standard, like the purity of the coin used to vary greatly. I mean, it used to differ a lot. Like the purity might vary for gold from 97 to 99% or 95 to 92%. So this variation used to, it makes the coin unacceptable for international trade and creates problem for many people. So Ambedkar notices that during the Mughal period, the success of kingdoms were also due to the monetary standards, also the standard of coins as well. Like if there is a government or a kingdom which used to mint good coins or better quality coins, and they used to maintain their standards, uh, that used to, that the coin of that kingdom was more readily acceptable to people in other places, and used to facilitate trade as well. And that is one of the reasons why the Mughal kingdom was very prosperous in that period. And as we know, like the Britishers used to trade a lot with the Mughals. The Chinese used to trade a lot with the Mughals. Uh, when the Mughal Empire starts collapsing, the mints they went to like a mint, like certain mints like the Bombay Mint was handled by the British East India Company, and other mints went to the princely states or the smaller kings over there. And what they started doing is they started to mix other metals with the coins. They used to fiddle around with the weight, and the quality of the coins deteriorated. And that created a problem of acceptance of these coins between the different regions. Like for example, if I'm taking coin by from a kingdom which the quality is not stable, they were very suspicious of accepting that coin, like what would be there. So it was not readily acceptable to people, and that created trade problems in that period. And the society was reduced to, like, they started bartering goods instead of using money. So money went out of existence. Like the need of money or the use of money went into uh, a very lower state, and that is when the export and stuff started falling, and the deindustrialization of India also started happening. And this is something which I know for sure. Like there are many kingdoms in China as well, where they started fiddling with their currency, and that created problem for them. They stopped, like they couldn't trade with other nations. So this is something which Ambedkar points out in this book, where like why money should be sound. And he was very critical of the government, like trying to fix of the gold standard exchange, like the government trying to fix what the parity should be. And he says that it creates an undervaluation either of gold or of silver, and in the market the rates keep on changing. And that is where the government start facing problem, that whenever the gold which the government is offering is undervalued, people start demanding a lot of gold from the government, and then the government has a problem to maintain that standard. And what they do is, like they try to buy more gold in order to avoid deficits and to maintain their reserves. And that creates a problem. It's not that gold itself has a problem. It's the attempt of the governments to fix the parity price, which is the culprit over here. So that is basically where he argues with Keynes, and he accuses Keynes that Keynes is not doing proper economics. He doesn't go and justifies his things. uh, that is where Ambedkar's thing is. And Ambedkar actually mentions this in this book, that trade is an important apparatus in society based on private property and pursuit of individual gain. Without it, it would be difficult for the members to distribute specialized product of their labor. Surely a lottery or an administrative device would be incompatible with its nature. Indeed, if it is to preserve its character, the only mode for the necessary distribution of the products of separate industry is that of private trading. But a trading society is unavoidably a pecuniary society, a society which necessity carries on its transaction in terms of money. In fact, the distribution is not primarily an exchange of goods, of products against product, but products against money. In such a society, money therefore necessarily becomes the pivot on which everything revolves. With money as the focusing point of all human efforts, interests, desires, and ambitions, a trading society is bound to function in a regime of price, where the success and failures are a result of nice calculations of price outlay as against price product. So here Ambedkar basically uh, explains like why prices are important in society and how the entire economic and activities of men revolve around money. And he mentions that without a sound money system this cannot happen. So instead of Keynes going in like where how the government should manage its paper reserves, how it should manage its gold reserve, what how it should try to set its parity rates with the bank rates. Uh, he is actually uh, asking the government not to interfere with the setting its with the monetary standards at all. So he warns government against that, and that is he is very sus suspicious of government, and he's saying that Keynes has overlooked the price index and the control and the attempt to control the price levels. And he mentions at certain period like where the bank where the government tried to set a purchasing power of the money, but it failed to do so because in the market the currency values were shifting. So he accuses Keynes of that he was not looking into the uh, basic concept of money itself and its purchasing power, like on what it depends on. So he says that Keynes himself would if he would have realized the failures and the problem with the gold exchange standard, he would have himself in the Keynes of 1920 will prefer a gold standard to a gold standard exchange. Uh, the only argument that Keynes had against issuing of gold coins was that the Indians are not going to accept it. Gold is an international currency, and mostly that Indians don't have a taste for gold. Like many countries do not have a taste for gold, and therefore there should be a parity kind of thing. So that's what mostly Ambedkar says, and I'm not going to get into other details. But he concludes that the government should actually melt all its gold reserve, and the mint should be open to public. What that means is like people are going to carry raw gold bullions or bars or silver bars, and they're going to go to the mint, and they're going to make it into a coin or a bar, and they're going to exchange that. So basically that is what his idea. But Ambedkar misses out like the other facts of Keynes, which Keynes highlights, like like the purchasing of gold, at what price it should purchase, and for and this is something which the banks even have to take precautions. Like it has to estimate like what will be the demand of gold, and how much paper currency it should keep. If we are talking about bank of bank standards, like of decentralized or free banking standards, where how much paper currency and how much reserve should be kept, and what will be the changes of the reserves. These are some challenges that the banks at that point of time also they faced, and we are going to face again if we are going to go into gold standard. So they should be left on the left on mints, where if people need money, they have to procure the raw material and make it in coins or stuff. And there has to be some kind of a dematerializing kind of companies, where they will put in coins, or they will dematerialize their gold and stuff in a full reserve system kind of thing and take notes for it. And the other thing is that the note should be trustable. I mean, there has to be an element of trust um, of the people who are going to accept that note of that particular bank. So these are certain challenges which I think Keynes mentions against free banking, which we should take into account and not ignore it. So do you have any questions till now? Cool. Austrians and Keynesians, the similarities, and I'm pretty sure like Michael is the expert over here. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a mic. This is something where Lachman and Kisner. This comes from his one of Lachman's essay, and they are looking into Keynes, like what are the similarities or what are the common grounds between Keynes and Austrians. There are certain points where Keynes has made certain suggestions where I feel at times he Keynes realizes that the government like in in uh, in his first book with the Indian currency, he accuses the government of not being able to figure out or being lazy to buy silver at a particular price. So he says that the governments are also lazy and they are not as efficient as the market. But then he never goes in and justifies it pretty strongly. He just mentioned it and seems to just puts it away lightly. This is one thing which I've noticed in Keynes, that Keynes does mention a lot of things, uh, but he doesn't get into giving it the proper weight. The other thing which I have noticed in Keynes and most of his books is that he doesn't go into mathematical equations and mathematical relationships and stuff. He does that, but he does his books are not that mathematical. Like if you read a Marshall or and other Keynesians, where their books of economics is mostly they consist of differential equations and calculus and graphs and charts. Uh, with Keynes, you will not find that kind of uh, uh, mathematical explanations of stuff. Mostly, he's pretty much theoretical in his arguments, even in the general theory of money and employment, money and credit. There also he was not getting into the mathematical part. Mostly what he was trying to make arguments is using certain premises, and of course he does not account for a lot of things which we Austrians do. But that is another similarity which I think Lachman doesn't mention in this essay of the similarities between Keynes and Austrians. But this is something which I have noticed, so I will put it there. Uh, certain things where we have a common ground with Keynes is in 1990, where he wrote The Economic Consequences of Peace. This is a point of time where gold and silver supply were not arriving I mean during the war period. There was a shortage of gold and silver, and what people started do at that point of time, like they started issuing notes with the bank started denying the government started denying issuing encashing the paper notes for gold or silver, and instead they all the gold and silver reserves were directed into making of war equipments and payment to soldiers and stuff. But it was for all other activities, they were not encashing the paper currencies. And they also started printing paper currencies with a agreement that they will encash it somewhere in the future, and not immediately. So they had a suspension of they suspended encashing of paper notes, but they were printing a lot of paper notes. And this is something which we know has had taken place in Germany, where Germany and Austrian Empire were under pressure in the after the World War period to pay off their debts. So they started printing their currencies like at a very high pace, and they reached into severe inflations, and that inflation was creating problem for Germany. And this is what Keynes saw, that this is what was happening at that period in those countries which were low on gold and silver reserves, but they were issuing paper notes, and those paper notes were getting going into circulations. So he wrote that in that book, like as the inflation process proceeds, the real value of the currency fluctuates wildly from month to month. All permanent relationship between debtors and creditors, which form the ultimate foundation of capitalism, become so utterly disordered as to be most meaningless, and the process of wealth eating generates into a gamble and a lottery. Lenin was certainly right. There is no subtler, no surer mean of overturning the existing basis of a society than to debunch the currency. The process engaged all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction, and does it in a manner which not one man in a million is able to diagnose. Uh, Keynes here realizes that inflation is a way of debenching the currency, debasing the currency, and that most people are not going to understand like how it takes place. Like it happens in the background. They do not realize that their purchasing power is they are being robbed of their purchasing power. So that is one thing which Keynes and Austrian had had a common ground. Uh, Then he also agreed with Hayek on the treatment of mathematics. I think there is another quote which I couldn't find in this essay where he says that the economic is not a clockwork where you can predict things about the future. And I think this is something where he changed his thought from writing from the treatise of on probability, and then experiencing the huge loss in his adventures in the market and during the crash of 1920. And I think that is what changed his mind towards the uncertainty and towards the use of mathematics in economics. So he was a little skeptical about the use of mathematics and what can be what we can count and what we cannot count. So that is another mindset change which I think had Keynes had. So he says in chemistry and physics and all other natural sciences, the object of experiment is to fill in the actual values of various quantities and factors appearing in the equation or a formula, and the work is done. And when done is all and once and for all. In economics, that is not the case. And to convert a model into a quantitative formula is to destroy its usefulness as an instrument of thought. Tinbergen endeavors to work out the variable quantities in a particular case, and then he suggests that the quantitative formula so obtained has general validity. Yet in fact, by filling in the figures, which one can be quite sure will not apply next time, so far from increasing the value of his instrument, he has destroyed it. All the statisticians tend that way. So basically what he say suggesting is the subjective nature of in measurement, and how models cannot you know cannot determine what the future would be. He also makes another quote where he says, I also want to emphasize strongly the point about economics being a moral science. I mentioned before that it deals with introspection and with values. I might have added that it deals more with motive, expectation, and psychological uncertainty. One has to be constantly on the guard against treating the material as constant and homogeneous. It is as though the fall of an apple on the ground dependent on the apple's motive, on whether it is worthwhile falling to the ground and whether the ground wanted the apple to fall, and on mistaken calculations on the part of the apple as to how far it was from the center of the earth. Basically, here he's saying that how things are subjective, like where like how do we make an objective sense of what happens when an apple forms from the tree. So that's the certain similarities which Lashman Pro puts forward about the similarities between Keynes and Austrians. Michael, do you have anything to add to this one? You are the specialist here. Okay, yeah, both. Does I have a? I think I will discuss it later on. But I think Hayek believed in the neutrality of money in the long run, right? And Mises was an opponent of that. I think that is what a difference between Mises and Hayek is on the neutrality of money. Okay, cool. Uh, yeah. So maybe we will check that thing on Hayek and Mises if they differed on neutrality of money. Uh, but that's for later. Some differences between Austrians and Keynes. It's mostly with the core concept. Like we believe in subjectivism. We look at value, the scale of values, and the matching of scale of values, the optimism and the expectations of people. On what reason they give? I mean, they do understand, like Keynes says, right? The increase of money supply. That's one thing which is going to change. I mean, that is going to change the purchasing power parity of money, right? So that is one thing I think. I'm not sure about all the Keynesians, but that is what Keynes observed during the Treaty of Versailles, right? Michael, what do you think? What are the reasons do Keynesians give for non-neutrality of money? Sure. So Michael says it has real effects over time and are not just nominal. They argue that once one rejects Say's law, one must also reject money as a will. It's a different approach than Austrians all over, which is something which I agree. Anything else you want to add to that, Michael? Cool. It will. Michael says it would take too long to type, probably possibly in an essay. Yeah, definitely we can discuss it. In in our internal groups as well. So thank you, Michael. And let's finish off. I will just highlight a little bit of differences between Keynes and Austrians. We differ on the core concept, like the basic. It's okay, Michael. Next time, I think, yeah, next time we will do another session, probably much better organized. So yeah, back to the Austrians believe in they have a different method altogether. We do not go in with equilibrium theories or differential equations, or we don't try to quantify things. This is something which most mainstream economics accuse the Austrians, that we don't quantify, we don't have any measurement for how big the economy is and how to measure it. We don't talk about those concepts. But those are really absurd. Even certain times, Keynes has agreed that you cannot measure what the actual output is, but you can have a count of things. So by which you can make sense, like how many people are employed, and we do not know what how if the people employed are of higher skills or lower skills. That really cannot be found out. What are the skills of the people? So I think the core concept is like we follow methodological individualism, where we look at prices, how prices are formed, how the scale of values matter, uh, how we reach equilibrium using those scale of values, what happens, why savings are important. Like even we look at to isolated societies and economic economy as well, using Robinson Crusoe, and where we establish like what savings are, what interest rate, and hypothetical creations like ERE, where we try to explain interest rate with the with time preference theory of value of people, how they determine interest rates. Keynes do not doesn't look into that thing. For him, savings and investments are the same thing. I think there is a curve that the Keynesians work on, ISMS curve something, investment saving, and they put the investment and savings on the same uh, axis. And I think that is a fallacy. Investment and saving cannot happen in the same point of time. It has to be different. People have to save, and once they save, planning for uncertainty in the future. And basically and after they have saved for that particular project, or that for that production process, they get into investment. So the Keynesians don't have that attitude of towards time, and they sometimes consider saving as an investment. At other times they consider investment as a saving. So I think there is a difference between between Keynes and Austrians over there as well. Michael, I think you want to add something over here. Okay, Michael says on the ISLM model, Hicks later on rejected it and claimed it was a mistake. Most post-Keynesian reject it as well. It seems to have staying power for the neoclassical synthesis, Keynesians thought. Yeah, maybe that is something which is true. I've seen that Keynesians, they tend to use different models, right? Even the neoclassicals use the same model, and some I mean, nowadays there is a tendency where the Keynesians use some neoclassical concepts, and the neoclassicals also use the Keynesian concepts. So it's pretty difficult to find out like who is a pure Keynesian and who is a pure neoclassical, who is a pure Chicagoite, right? In these days. So yeah, that's the thing. Uh, Okay, and we'll go further from here. Now, for Keynes, the business cycle is mostly about for expectations, where he says that the business cycles occurs because people have more animal instincts or less of animal instincts. They're very optimistic and they take risky ventures, and that results into a bust. For Austrians, it's mostly the interest rate manipulation and the currency manipulation of the credit expansion, basically done by the banking cycle by keeping the interest rates lower than what the pure rate or what the natural rate of interest would be, and thus it messes up, distorts the calculation of investors. Sorry about that, excuse me. And that creates the boom and bust cycles. So another difference between Keynes and Austrian. Money. The Austrians understand that money has to be sound and commodity. It is not neutral. And Keynesians, they don't have that concept of money. For us, it deals with the regression. Like money started from the why it has emerged from a barter system. What is the money price, and what is its correlation with the supply with the capital goods and the consumer goods. What should be the and what happens if the money supply is changed and these two ratios do not change? It creates inflation and stuff. So the Keynesians do not get into these things. For them, the concept of money is entirely, I mean, I mean, they don't have a concept of money. They don't really address the money in that sense. uh, it's for them, it's also a balance of account. It's just something which you can add into account, and that's money for you. So that's another thing which the Keynesians look into at money, like it's just a unit of account as well. So interest rates, for them, the time preference rate of interest is something that they don't agree with. They think that mostly it's some kind of an it's related to savings and economic conditions. It's mostly about expectations as well. It's not based on discounting the time preference. It's and what the time market is. So they don't look into the desire of, like, if the present marginal utility has been met, and that is resulting into a change of expectation of people to stop consumption, or their most and save for the future, and then consume things later when they again have the utility of the utility requirement of those goods. So those are certain differences between Keynesians and Austrians. Even the wage theory, like different we have this heterogeneity of looking into wages, which the Keynesians do not have, as they aggregate the total income level of people, and they do not look into, like, what is creating the unemployment. Is it due to government stimulus to certain areas where which is affecting the wage rates, or if there is some subsidies which is given to certain industries which is reflected to wage rates. So they don't look into those correlations as we Austrians do. Anything you want to add in, Michael? Or Michael says capital may be another one. For Keynes, it is always about the stock as a whole in an aggregate instead of being heterogeneous. So heterogeneity is something which is very much Austrians, and I think which is missing in most school of thought, and that leads to a lot of problems because they mess up with the common denominator in their economic calculations, and that is something that we need to account for. So I think that's all about Keynes and the Austrians, the economics of Keynes, and what his thought was, his entire work in short. If you have any questions or anything, just let me know later on. Where would Ambedkar disagree with the Austrians? Ambedkar is a neoclassical look. Sorry, he is a neoclassical, and he comes from an age where from an era where he's he's not acquainted with the latest economic developments of that period. But if you look, Ambedkar has not written much on economics, but something that he understood at that point of time was the concept of money and the importance of prices. I think which is pretty similar to Austrians, because he put the sound money concept at the right at the center of all the economic activity, which even the Austrians do. Where Ambedkar would disagree is very tough to say. I think it's on the on one ground where Ambedkar and Keynes they look into they both saw that there is a problem with the government of you know uh, trying to separate the requirement for running the other expenses or the government expenses, like taking care of railways and stuff, and the banking thing, where it needs to have a different reserve for the banking requirement, for the monetary requirement. So they both wanted to create a central bank and to at least handle the monetary affairs between different banks and mediate between them. So I think that is where we might disagree, because we want money to be entirely free. But I don't think Ambedkar ever went in and he would have he would have he implemented his entire economics while he was founding the Central Bank of India, the Reserve Bank of India. So if the mints were given to public, if what he believed in, then I think there is no possibility of central banking. So how would he relate it is something which I couldn't figure out. Uh, that's what I think would be the disagreement between Austrians and Ambedkar on the role of central bank. I don't think uh, the most interesting element of Keynes, the way the most important things I feel with Keynes is where Keynes is looking at the short term thing, where there is a crisis, and the way Keynes look at the problem is he's not looking into the long term thing, like what is going to happen in the long term, but he's looking right at the problem, like there is a war, there is a disaster, there is a economic crash. It doesn't matter what the government did or who is responsible for it, but right now we are in a situation and how to get out of it. So that is what Keynes always used to focus on, and I think it is reflected in his books and his work, where he's not talking about what the long term solutions will be, and he's all about like fixing the problem from the point of government. And that is an interesting element, because when we look at the Austrians, we do not give an immediate solution. We don't offer an immediate solutions. So even if Keynes might be wrong, but he's looking in a different way, right? Like you have destructions and a world war maybe, and everything is destroyed. You don't have production facilities. So where are you? Who is going to invest? So there are certain things where he believes that the government should come in, and now this is a very tricky thing where I don't know if we have an answer like how it is going to form. So even the government cannot do anything. That is something that we understand, that but still I'm not sure. I have to reinvestigate that proposal of that point of view of Keynes, like if the government can't do anything in such kind of scenarios. And then the other thing is about malinvestment, where the Austrians believe it should correct itself, and which is true that the recession is a correction period, but then recession also creates a lot of problem for a lot many people. And I think Keynes was against the idea that liquidation of the misallocated funds are going to take, is going to consume a lot of time, and that is going to create a problem. Like, people are not going to gain skill overnight. We cannot liquidate, big factories overnight and reallocate them in other areas. So those are certain things which the thought of Keynes is not. I'm not appreciating, but this is something which makes me rethink what our proposed solutions would be, and that's one thing which I think Keynes is good at. And his theory of expectations, which is, I think, he looks at the market like, there is a period of over optimism and over pessimism in the market. So expectations plays a very vital role, and I think that is not being looked into by modern day economics as much as they should look into it. Like, what creates these expectations, and what changes this expectation. So expectation theory is something which we should focus on. What about you, Michael? Do you have anything which you find interesting about Keynes? The importance of liquidity preference and how it relates to uncertainty is interesting and possible has a merit. Yeah, definitely. Uh, yep, that's another thing which is something that we should look into. Liquidity crunch, as I said, yeah, liquidity crunch, and this is something which is going to take place when there is a disaster, right? An economic disaster, and that is something which we should. I mean, I have to get in and also read about liquidity preference and how it relates. So that is something which I have not put I have not concentrated much, but yep, that's a point. So, anyways, guys, it was good having you all. Uh, Thank you for joining me, and hope to see you next week, where we will be discussing Man, Economy and State, chapter 7, 8 on Saturday and Sunday 9 and 10. Thank you, Michael, for joining. Thank you, Shashank, Shikhar. It was nice having you all.